In the vast, silent expanse of space, where stars burned like distant lanterns and planets drifted in endless orbits, something unusual happened. A faint signal, a broken, repeating cry for help, cut through the void. It wasn't loud or clear, but it was there, pulsing faintly on an old frequency that hadn't been used in centuries. The signal came from a region of space long abandoned by humanity, a place marked as dangerous and unexplored on star charts. Captain Calavera stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Iron Resolve, staring at the blinking light on her console. Her sharp green eyes narrowed as she leaned forward, her fingers brushing over the controls. The distress call had been intercepted just moments ago, and already it sent chills down her spine. She had heard signals like this before, during training exercises when they simulated first contact scenarios, but never out here, not in real life. "Play it again," Kale ordered, her voice calm but firm. The comms officer hesitated for a second, then pressed a button. Static filled the air, followed by a strange, haunting sound, a mix of clicks, hums, and what almost sounded like words. The language was alien, unlike anything anyone aboard the ship had ever encountered. Yet, strangely, parts of it felt familiar, as if echoes of human speech were buried beneath layers of distortion. "What do you think, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Rin Solis, Kel's second-in-command. He stood beside her, his arms crossed, his expression tense. "Could be a trap." "It could be," Kale admitted, her gaze still fixed on the screen showing the signal's origin point. "But we can't ignore it. Not unless we want to risk missing something important." Rin frowned. "We're weeks away from our patrol route. If we divert now, Command will have our heads." Kale turned to face him, her jaw tightening. "Command isn't here, Rin. And if this is what I think it is..." She trailed off, her mind racing. Something about the signal tugged at her memory, though she couldn't quite place why. Then it hit her, the rhythm of the clicks, the pattern of the hums. They reminded her of recordings she'd studied years ago, back when she was just starting her career. Recordings linked to a mission involving her older brother, Jace. Jace had disappeared 5 years earlier while investigating a similar anomaly near the edge of known space. No wreckage, no survivors. Just silence. Official reports declared him lost, presumed dead, but Kale refused to believe it. Deep down, she always suspected he found something extraordinary, something too dangerous for anyone else to handle. Now, hearing this signal, she wondered if fate had finally brought her closer to answers. "We're going," Kale said firmly, cutting off any further protests from Rin. "Set course for the signal's origin. Maximum speed." The crew hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Diverting from their assigned route without clearance was risky, even for the elite Deathworlder fleet. These soldiers were trained to survive the harshest environments, bred on planets so brutal that only the strongest endured. But none of them relished the idea of disobeying orders, especially when venturing into uncharted territory. As the engines roared to life and the Iron Resolve surged forward, Kale gripped the railing of the bridge. She knew the risks. She also knew she couldn't turn away. Not this time. Whatever, or whoever, had sent that signal might hold the key to finding Jace. Or worse, it could mean trouble for all of humanity. For now, all she could do was wait and prepare. The journey ahead promised danger, mystery, and perhaps redemption. One thing was certain: the universe rarely gave second chances, and Kale intended to make the most of this one. The journey toward the source of the distress signal was anything but smooth. As the Iron Resolve and its accompanying fleet plunged deeper into uncharted space, the crew began to notice strange phenomena around them. The stars grew dimmer, swallowed by an eerie fog of shifting nebulae that glowed faintly with unnatural colors. Blues, greens, and purples swirling together like oil on water. Static crackled through the ship's comm system, interrupting transmissions and leaving the crew uneasy. Captain Calavera stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the view screen as the nebula loomed ahead. The sight was mesmerizing yet unsettling. It felt alive, as though it were watching them in return. She clenched her fists tightly, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. "Lieutenant Solis," she said, turning to Rin, who stood nearby. "What's our ETA?" Rin glanced at his console before replying. "Another 12 hours, Captain. But we're picking up some anomalies." He hesitated, clearly unsure how to phrase what he'd found. "Gravitational spikes, energy readings off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's playing tricks on our instruments." Kale frowned. "Playing tricks. Explain." Rin nodded and pulled up a holographic display showing their trajectory. Lines representing gravitational forces zigzagged wildly across the map. "It's like the laws of physics are bending here. Ships could get torn apart if we don't tread carefully." Before Kale could respond, the lights flickered briefly, drawing gasps from the crew. Then came whispers, soft, indistinct murmurs echoing through the corridors. At first, no one spoke of it aloud, but soon enough, reports trickled in from other ships in the fleet. Crew members claimed to hear voices calling their names or see shadowy figures moving just out of sight. "They're scared," Rin muttered under his breath, keeping his voice low so only Kel could hear. "And they have every right to be. This place feels cursed." Kale shot him a sharp look. "We don't believe in curses, Lieutenant. We deal with facts. Keep morale steady." But even she couldn't deny the growing tension aboard the ship. Her own mind wasn't immune to the creeping dread. In quiet moments, when the hum of the engines faded, she swore she heard fragments of words. Not human, not alien, but something in between. They reminded her of the distress signal, distorted and haunting. Hours passed, and the fleet pressed onward despite the ominous signs. Finally, they'd reached the edge of the nebula, where the signal's origin lay hidden behind layers of cosmic debris. What awaited them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A massive asteroid field orbiting a dying star. The asteroids glowed faintly, their surfaces etched with strange symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. "This doesn't make sense," whispered Ensign Terran, the youngest member of the bridge crew. She pointed at the glowing symbols. "Those markings, they're artificial. Someone, or something, put them there." Kale stepped closer to the view screen, studying the asteroids. Something about the symbols resonated with her, stirring memories of ancient Earth artifacts she'd studied during her training. Could this be connected to the civilization that created the distress signal? Or was it something older, something far more dangerous? "Captain," Rin interrupted her thoughts, his tone urgent. "I've cross-referenced the signal's frequency with our database. There's a match, an old Earth transmission from over 300 years ago. A colony ship reported encountering similar symbols before vanishing without a trace." Cal's heart sank. Another missing ship, another mystery left unsolved. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Was she leading her crew into a trap? Was this entire mission doomed from the start? No. She shook her head firmly, pushing aside those thoughts. If there was even a chance this signal could lead her to Jace, or reveal a threat to humanity, she had to see it through. "Prepare boarding parties," she ordered, her voice steady, despite the weight pressing down on her chest. "We're going in." As the fleet maneuvered closer to the largest asteroid, the glowing symbols flared brighter, almost as if reacting to their presence. Whether it was a warning or a welcome remained unclear. One thing was certain: whatever secrets lay ahead, they weren't going to be easy to uncover. The Deathworlder fleet approached the largest asteroid cautiously, its glowing symbols now pulsing in a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost alive. Captain Calvera watched from the bridge as shuttles detached from the Iron Resolve and headed toward the massive rock floating silently in the void. Her stomach tightened with anticipation. This was it, the moment they would uncover the source of the distress signal. Boarding parties were dispatched to explore the asteroid's surface, armed with scanners, weapons, and protective gear designed for hostile environments. Among them was Lieutenant Rin Solis, who insisted on leading one of the teams despite Cal's protests. "If this is trouble," he'd said, "you'll need someone you trust out there." As the shuttles landed, the crew stepped onto the asteroid's jagged terrain. The air was thin and cold, but their suits kept them safe. The glowing symbols covered every inch of the ground, casting eerie shadows across the desolate landscape. It felt like walking through an ancient graveyard, where each step might awaken something long forgotten. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Corporal Dax, a grizzled veteran scanning the area with his rifle raised. "Feels like we're being watched." "Focus, Dax," snapped Rin. He gestured for the team to move forward, following the trail of symbols that led deeper into the asteroid. The markings grew brighter as they advanced, until they reached what appeared to be an entrance, a gaping hole carved into the rock, lined with more pulsating glyphs. Inside, the air shifted. The walls shimmered faintly, as though made of liquid metal, and the temperature dropped sharply. Scanners went haywire, unable to make sense of the environment. The team pressed on, guided only by instinct and the dim light emitted by the symbols. Then they saw it. A derelict alien ship lay embedded within the asteroid, its sleek design unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Its hull was scorched and cracked, evidence of some catastrophic event. But what truly chilled them to the bone were the bodies inside. Dozens of skeletal remains littered the corridors, their forms twisted in agony. Some still clutched weapons. Others reached out as if pleading for help. Whatever had killed them hadn't been quick or kind. "What happened here?" whispered Ensign Mira, her voice trembling over the comms. She knelt beside one of the corpses, examining it closely. "These aren't human. They're alien, but not Vorith." Before anyone could respond, movement caught their attention. A faint groan echoed through the corridor, followed by the sound of dragging footsteps. The team raised their weapons, hearts pounding. Out of the shadows staggered a lone survivor, an emaciated figure barely clinging to life. Its skin was pale and translucent, its eyes wide with terror. When it spoke, it wasn't in words but in thoughts. Telepathic bursts that flooded the minds of everyone nearby. "Help, please." Rin lowered his weapon slightly, stunned by the sudden intrusion into his mind. "Who are you? What happened here?" "I am Irinder," came the reply, weak but clear. "My people, destroyed. The Vorith. They consume fear, despair. You must leave while you can." Before they could question further, alarms blared in their helmets. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, pulsing rapidly. The floor trembled beneath their feet. "We've triggered something," shouted Dax, backing toward the exit. "We need to go now." But it was too late. From the shadows emerged swarms of spider-like drones, their metallic bodies gleaming ominously. They moved with terrifying speed, surrounding the team and cutting off their escape route. "Fall back." Rin barked, firing at the nearest drone. His shots ricocheted harmlessly off its armored shell. Panic spread among the crew as more drones closed in, their clicking sounds growing louder. In the chaos, Irinder grabbed Rin's arm, pulling him toward a hidden passage. "Follow me. There is another way out." With no other choice, the team obeyed, retreating into the depths of the alien ship. Behind them, the drones continued their relentless pursuit, screeching as though enraged by their prey's escape. As they fled, Cal's voice crackled over the comms. "Lieutenant, report. What's happening down there?" Rin hesitated, glancing at the frail alien leading them deeper into the unknown. "Captain, we've found a survivor, and a warning. The Vorith are coming, and they're hunting us." Silence followed, heavy with dread. For the first time in years, Cal felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever they had stumbled upon, it was far bigger and far deadlier than any of them had anticipated. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, the atmosphere was tense. The survivors of the boarding party gathered in the war room, their faces pale and drawn from what they had witnessed inside the alien ship. Irinder, the frail, telepathic alien who had guided them to safety, sat silently at the center of the table, its translucent skin shimmering faintly under the harsh lights. Captain Calvera paced back and forth, her mind racing as she processed the information they had brought back. "So let me get this straight," Cale said, stopping abruptly to face the group. "You're telling me there's a species out there called the Voreth, and they feed on fear. That's their diet." Arindor nodded slowly, projecting its thoughts directly into everyone's minds. "Yes, Captain. The Voreth are not like other beings. They do not seek resources or territory. Their survival depends on consuming the emotions of sentient life. Fear, despair, hopelessness. When they find a target, they destroy everything around it to amplify those feelings before feeding." Lieutenant Rin Solis leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And you're saying these things are already moving toward us. How close are they?" "They are closer than you realize," Arindor replied grimly. "The drones you encountered were scouts. By triggering the ship's alarms, you have alerted the main swarm. It will not take them long to arrive." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Even among the hardened Deathworlders, trained to endure the harshest conditions imaginable, the idea of an enemy that thrived on terror was deeply unsettling. Fear wasn't just a weakness, it was now ammunition for their foes. Cale crossed her arms, studying Arindor carefully. "Why should we trust you? For all we know, you could be working with the Voreth. Maybe this whole thing is a setup." Arindor's expression softened, though it was hard to read emotion on such an alien face. "I understand your suspicion, Captain. But if I were truly your enemy, why would I risk my life to save your people? My kind created the Voreth long ago as weapons against our rivals. We failed to control them, and they turned on us instead. All I want is to see them destroyed, or contained for good." Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing several crew members off balance. Alarms blared across the fleet, and red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. "Captain," shouted Ensign Terran from her station outside the war room. "We've got incoming contacts, dozens of them. They're coming out of hyperspace." Cale rushed to the bridge, the rest of the team close behind. On the main view screen, a swarm of sleek, insectoid ships materialized in formation, surrounding the Deathworlder fleet. Each vessel pulsed with the same eerie energy as the glowing symbols on the asteroid, their movements synchronized as though controlled by a single mind. "Battle stations," Cale barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Prepare for engagement." The crews sprang into action, manning their posts with practiced efficiency. Weapons systems powered up, shields reinforced, and engines roared to life as the fleet braced for combat. But even as they prepared, a sense of dread lingered. These ships weren't ordinary enemies. They'd radiated malice, as if aware of every fear gnawing at the humans' resolve. As the first wave of Voreth drones launched toward the fleet, Arindor's voice echoed softly in Cal's mind. "Remember, Captain, do not give in to fear. If you do, they will consume you entirely." Cal clenched her fists tightly, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't afford doubt. Not now. Turning to her crew, she raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Listen up. These bastards think they can break us. They think we'll crumble under pressure. But we're Deathworlders. We don't back down. We fight harder when the odds are against us. Today, we show them exactly what humanity is made of." Her words ignited a spark among the crew. Despite the looming threat, determination replaced fear. Cannons fired, missiles streaked through space, and the battle began in earnest. The Voreth adapted quickly, countering every move with terrifying precision. Yet for every blow landed, the Deathworlders struck back twice as hard. But as the skirmish raged on, one thing became painfully clear. Defeating the Voreth wouldn't be easy. This was no ordinary fight. It was a test of willpower, resilience, and courage. And Cale knew that if they faltered, even for a moment, The consequences would be catastrophic. The battle against the Voreth was unlike anything the Deathworlder fleet had ever faced. The insectoid ships darted through space with unnatural speed, their movements fluid and unpredictable, as though guided by a single hive mind. Every time the fleet managed to destroy one of the drones, 3 more took its place, swarming closer like a tide of metallic locusts. Explosions lit up the void, sending shockwaves rippling through the fleet's shields. Captain Calvera stood rigid on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her jaw clenched as she watched the chaos unfold. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the railing, her eyes scanning the view screen for any sign of weakness in the enemy formation. But there was none. The Voreth adapted too quickly, learning from every tactic the humans deployed. It wasn't just a fight, it was a test of survival. "Shields at 40%, shouted Ensign Terran, her voice trembling with urgency. "We can't keep this up much longer." Kale didn't respond immediately. She knew Terran was right. The fleet was outnumbered and outmatched. Each ship bore scars from relentless attacks, their hulls scorched and systems failing. Casualties mounted by the second, and morale was beginning to crack under the pressure. Fear, a weapon the Voreth wielded expertly, was spreading like wildfire among the crew. Lieutenant Rin Solis stepped beside her, his face grim. "Captain, we need to fall back. Regroup while we still can." "No," Kale snapped, her tone sharp enough to silence him. "If we retreat now, they'll chase us down. We lose momentum. We lose everything. But staying here is suicide." Rin shot back, frustration leaking into his voice. "We're not equipped for this kind of fight." Before Kel could reply, Erinder's telepathic voice cut through the tension. "There may be another way. If you target the central node controlling the swarm, you can disrupt their coordination temporarily. It won't destroy them, but it will buy you time." Kale turned to Erinder, who sat quietly near the edge of the bridge. "Where is it?" Erinder projected an image into her mind, a massive, pulsating structure at the heart of the swarm. It looked like a living organism, tendrils of energy connecting it to the smaller drones. "That is the Nexus. Destroy it, and the swarm will falter. But only briefly." Kale nodded, making her decision. "All hands, listen up. New orders. Focus fire on the central node. Take out those turrets guarding it, then hit it with everything we've got. Do not stop until it's gone." The order spread across the fleet, reigniting a flicker of hope among the weary crew. Cannons roared once more, targeting the heavily fortified Nexus. The Voreth responded fiercely, concentrating their forces around the structure. Shields flared and buckled under the relentless assault, but the Deathworlders held firm, driven by sheer determination. Amidst the chaos, Ren led a daring maneuver aboard his ship, the Stormcaller. He piloted it directly into the thickest part of the swarm, drawing fire away from the rest of the fleet. His vessel took heavy damage, its engine sputtering as flames licked at its hull. Despite the danger, he refused to retreat. "This is Lieutenant Solis," he said over the comms, his voice steady despite the destruction around him. "I'm taking out these turrets. Cover me." "Rin, no," Kale shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "Get out of there." But it was too late. With a final burst of firepower, Rin rammed the Stormcaller into the Nexus, detonating its reactors in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled through the swarm, crippling dozens of drones and severing the connection between the central node and the rest of the swarm. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then, cheers erupted across the fleet as the surviving crew realized what Rin had done. Tears streamed down Cal's face as she whispered his name, her heart heavy with grief yet filled with pride. "He saved us," she murmured, turning back to the view screen. The remaining Voreth drones began retreating, their coordination shattered without the Nexus. Though battered and bruised, the Deathworlder fleet had survived. For now. As the adrenaline faded, reality set in. They had won this round, but the war was far from over. and Kale knew that sacrifices like Rin's would haunt her forever. Still, she forced herself to stay focused. Humanity couldn't afford despair, not when the Vorith were still out there, waiting to strike again. The Deathworlder fleet limped away from the battlefield, their ships battered and scarred. Smoke-filled corridors and emergency lights flickered in place of the usual bright illumination. The crew worked tirelessly to repair critical systems, but exhaustion hung heavy in the air. Despite the temporary victory over the Vorith swarm, no one felt triumphant. Lieutenant Rin's soulless sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone, especially Captain Calvera. Kale sat alone in her quarters, staring at a holographic display of the battle map. Her fingers traced the location where the Stormcaller had detonated, obliterating the Vorith nexus. She clenched her jaw, trying to push aside the guilt gnawing at her. "You did what you had to do," she muttered to herself, though the words offered little comfort. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Erindor entered hesitantly, its frail form casting faint shadows under the dim light. "Captain," it began telepathically, its voice calm but urgent. "There is more I must tell you." Kale looked up, her green eyes sharp and wary. "More? Haven't we been through enough already?" Erindor nodded solemnly. "I understand your frustration, but time is running out. The Vorith will regroup soon, and when they do, they will come stronger. There is only one way to stop them permanently." "And what's that?" Kale asked, leaning forward. "The Ancients, my people, left behind a failsafe, a device capable of collapsing the Vorith hive mind entirely. But retrieving it won't be easy. It requires 3 core components hidden across ancient ruins scattered throughout this sector." Kale frowned, skepticism creeping into her tone. "Ruins? You expect me to believe your ancestors built something like that and just left it lying around?" "It was not meant for us to find," Erindor explained. "Only those deemed worthy could access the failsafe. My people created safeguards to ensure it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands, including their own." Kale rubbed her temples, considering the implications. Trusting Erindor still felt risky, but she couldn't deny the aliens' knowledge had saved them so far. If there was even a chance this failsafe could end the threat once and for all, she had to take it. "Fine," she said finally. "Where are these ruins?" Erindor projected coordinates onto the display. 3 locations lit up, each farther from human space than the last. One was buried beneath an ocean of liquid methane. Another floated within the chaotic storms of a gas giant, and the third orbited dangerously close to a black hole. Each site came with escalating challenges designed to test intruders' resilience and ingenuity. "This is insane," Kale muttered, shaking her head. "Even if we survive getting there, how do we know this thing will work?" "You don't," Erindor admitted. "But without it, humanity, and countless other species, will face extinction. The Vorith cannot be defeated by conventional means. This is your only hope." Kale sighed deeply, weighing the risks. Diverting the fleet deeper into hostile territory went against every instinct she had as a commander. Yet, staying put wasn't an option either. The Vorith would return, stronger and angrier, and the fleet wouldn't withstand another direct assault. She stood abruptly, resolve hardening in her expression. "All right, we'll do it. But if this turns out to be a trap, Erindor, I swear." "It isn't," Erindor interrupted gently. "And I will prove my loyalty. Allow me to merge my consciousness with your ship's eye. I can assist in navigating the ruins and deciphering their defenses." Kale hesitated. Merging an alien mind with their systems carried enormous risks, but desperation clouded her judgment. Finally, she nodded. "Do it. But if you betray us—" "I won't," Erindor promised. As preparations began for the perilous journey ahead, tensions simmered among the crew. Some questioned whether chasing ancient relics was worth further losses. Others argued that turning back would leave humanity vulnerable. Amidst the debate, Kale remained steadfast, driven by duty and the memory of Rin's sacrifice. "We're not giving up," she declared during a briefing. "Not while there's still a chance to win. We've faced impossible odds before, and we'll do it again. Together." Her words rallied the weary soldiers, reigniting a flicker of hope. As the fleet set course for the first set of ruins, Kale stared out at the stars, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The road would be dangerous, but failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Deathworlder fleet arrived at the first set of ruins, their battered ships silhouetted against the eerie glow of a dying sun. The ruins themselves were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a sprawling labyrinth of towering obelisks and jagged spires, jutting out from the surface of a barren moon. Each structure pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light, as though alive and watching. Captain Calvera stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her eyes scanning the alien architecture through the view screen. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered under her breath, gripping the railing tightly. Beside her, Irinder's voice echoed softly in her mind. "These ruins are designed to test intruders," the alien explained telepathically. "Only those who prove their worth may claim the core component hidden within." Kale turned to face Irinder, her expression grim. "Worth? What does that even mean?" "It means endurance, ingenuity, and courage," Irinder replied. "The trials will push you to your limits, and beyond. Fail, and the consequences will be fatal." Before Kale could respond, Lieutenant Commander Maravos stepped forward. A seasoned soldier with a reputation for calm under pressure, she volunteered to lead the ground team. "We've faced worse odds before, Captain," Mara said firmly. "Let us handle this." Kale hesitated but nodded. "All right. Take your best people. But stay sharp, this isn't just about brute force. We're dealing with ancient tech here." As shuttles descended onto the moon's surface, the crew disembarked cautiously. The air was thin and cold, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of energy emanating from the ruins. Mara led the team toward the largest obelisk, its surface etched with glowing symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves as they approached. "This is it," Irinder's voice projected into their minds. "The entrance to the trial chamber lies inside. Be prepared, for once you enter, there is no turning back." Mara exchanged determined glances with her squad before stepping through the massive doorway. Inside, the air shimmered unnaturally, distorting their surroundings. Walls seemed to stretch endlessly, and gravity fluctuated unpredictably, forcing them to adapt quickly. The first challenge came swiftly, a series of platforms suspended over a bottomless chasm. As soon as the team stepped onto the first platform, the others began shifting erratically, requiring precise timing and coordination to cross safely. One misstep sent Ensign Terran plummeting into the abyss, saved only by Corporal Dax grabbing her arm at the last second. "Stay focused," Mara barked, her voice cutting through the tension. "We don't have room for mistakes." They pressed on, navigating increasingly complex puzzles and traps. At one point, illusions of their worst fears materialized around them. Visions of loved ones dying, memories of past failures, and glimpses of impending doom. Some struggled to shake off the mental torment, while others pushed through sheer willpower. Kale monitored their progress anxiously from the ship, watching feeds transmitted by helmet cameras. When Mara reached the final chamber, she found herself facing a holographic projection of Jace, Cal's missing brother. The image spoke directly to her, warning her to turn back. Despite the illusion's realism, Mara recognized it for what it was and destroyed the emitter powering it. Finally, after hours of relentless effort, the team retrieved the first core component, a crystalline artifact pulsing with raw energy. As they exited the ruins, exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but relief washed over their faces. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, Kale examined the artifact closely. Its power was undeniable, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that each success came at a cost. 2 more components remained, each promising greater dangers. "We did it," Mara said, her voice hoarse but triumphant. 1 down, 2 to go. Kale nodded, her resolve hardening. Good work. Rest up. We'll need everyone at full strength for what's next. As the fleet plotted a course for the second location, Kale stared out at the stars, her mind racing. The trials had tested not just their skills, but their unity and resilience. Could they endure 2 more like this? She didn't know. But giving up wasn't an option. Not when humanity's survival depended on them. The Deathworlder fleet limped toward the second set of ruins, their ships still scared from previous battles. Morale was fragile, held together by sheer determination and the knowledge that failure meant doom for humanity. Captain Calavera stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her gaze fixed on the glowing console displaying the next destination. A gas giant with violent storms raging across its surface, the ruins floated within its turbulent atmosphere, hidden beneath layers of crushing pressure and lightning-charged clouds. But tension aboard the fleet had grown beyond the physical dangers they faced. Whispers of dissent spread like wildfire among the crew. Some questioned whether Arinder could truly be trusted. Others argued that chasing ancient relics was a fool's errand, risking lives for uncertain rewards. The strain of constant combat, sleepless nights, and mounting losses had frayed nerves to their breaking point. Kale noticed the unrest during a routine briefing. Lieutenant Commander Maravos, usually calm and composed, snapped at Ensign Terran over a minor tactical disagreement. Even Corporal Dax, one of the most level-headed soldiers, muttered under his breath about alien agendas. The cracks in unity were widening, and Kale knew she couldn't ignore them any longer. "Listen up," Kale barked, slamming her fist on the table to silence the murmurs. Her voice carried an edge that silenced the room instantly. "I know you're tired. I know you've lost friends, comrades, family, but we don't have the luxury of doubt right now. If we turn back, the Vorith win. Is that what you want?" Her words hung heavy in the air, but not everyone was convinced. A junior officer named Harker stepped forward hesitantly. "With respect, Captain, how do we know Arinder isn't using us? What if this failsafe is just another trap?" Arinder, standing quietly near the corner of the room, responded telepathically, its voice calm but firm. "If I wanted to betray you, I could have done so already. My people created the Vorith. They destroyed mine as well. I seek only to undo their mistake." Harker scowled but didn't press further. Still, Kale saw the seeds of rebellion taking root. Trust in leadership was slipping, and without trust, the mission would crumble. Later that evening, Kale confronted Arinder privately. "You said merging your consciousness with our systems would help us navigate these trials. Instead, it's dividing my crew. How do I fix this before it tears us apart?" Arinder's translucent form shimmered faintly as it projected images into Kale's mind, visions of past betrayals, wars waged over misunderstandings, civilizations collapsing under suspicion. "Fear and mistrust are weapons," it said softly. "They weaken even the strongest bonds. To unite them, you must show absolute faith, not just in me, but in yourself." Kale sighed deeply, knowing the alien was right. She needed to act decisively. That night, she gathered the entire crew in the main hangar bay, addressing them directly. "I won't lie to you," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "This mission is dangerous, and yes, we're risking everything. But ask yourselves this: who are we fighting for? Not just humanity, but every species out there facing extinction because of the Vorith. If we falter, no one else will stand against them. And if you think I'm blindly following Arinder, then look around you. Look at each other. We've survived impossible odds before because we trusted one another. Let's not lose that now." Her speech struck a chord. Many nodded silently, while others exchanged uneasy glances, but the mutinous whispers quieted, for now. As the fleet approached the gas giant, Kale made a bold decision. She allowed Arinder to merge deeper into the ship's eye, granting limited access to prove its loyalty. The move sparked heated debates among senior officers, but Kale refused to back down. "If this works," she told them, We'll need every advantage we can get. When the shuttles descended into the storm-ravaged atmosphere, lightning arced wildly around them, illuminating jagged ruins floating amidst the chaos. The crew braced themselves for another trial, unaware that internal divisions might prove more dangerous than anything waiting below. The second trial had tested the Deathworlder fleet's endurance and teamwork, but retrieving the third, and final, core component would demand far more than physical strength or tactical skill. As the Iron Resolve approached the black hole's accretion disk, where the ruins floated perilously close to its event horizon, Captain Calvera felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was no ordinary mission. It was a dance with death itself. The fleet navigated cautiously, their instruments struggling against the gravitational distortions caused by the black hole. Time dilation effects wreaked havoc on navigation systems, making seconds feel like minutes and leaving the crew disoriented. Onboard alarms blared intermittently as ships fought to maintain stable trajectories, their engines straining under the immense forces pulling at them. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Commander Maravos, gripping the railing of the shuttle carrying the ground team. Her voice carried both awe and dread as she stared out at the swirling maelstrom of light and energy surrounding them. "We're flying into a cosmic blender." Kale stood beside her, her jaw clenched. "If we don't get that last piece, everything we've done so far means nothing. Hold it together, Mara." The ruins emerged from the chaos, a massive structure shaped like a ring, suspended impossibly within the black hole's gravity well. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, pulsating faintly as though alive. Erender's telepathic voice echoed in their minds. "This is the most dangerous trial yet. The ancients designed it to test not just your body, but your mind and soul. Only those who conquer their deepest fears may claim the final component." As the shuttle landed on the edge of the structure, the team disembarked cautiously. Gravity fluctuated wildly, forcing them to adapt quickly. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the black hole itself were trying to drag them into its abyss. Corporal Dax stumbled briefly, catching himself before he fell. "Feels like this place doesn't want us here," he grumbled. Inside the ruins, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to shift and twist unnaturally. Hallways stretched endlessly, defying logic, while whispers filled the silence, voices calling out names, dredging up memories long buried. Each member of the team faced personal trials tailored to their worst fears. Ensign Terran saw visions of her family dying horrifically. Mara relived moments of failure when she couldn't save her squad during earlier missions. Even Cal confronted the ghost of her brother Jace, accusing her of abandoning him years ago. "You left me behind," Jace's spectral form shouted, his eyes filled with betrayal. "You let me die." Kale froze, tears pricking her eyes. For a moment, doubt consumed her. But then she remembered why she was here, not just for revenge or closure, but for humanity's survival. She clenched her fists tightly and stepped forward. "I didn't abandon you," she whispered fiercely, "and I won't abandon anyone else." With that, the illusion shattered, revealing the hidden chamber beyond. In the center of the room lay the final core component, a crystalline orb radiating intense energy. Cal reached for it, but the ground trembled violently as the ruins began collapsing. The black hole's pull intensified, threatening to swallow everything whole. "Get out of there." Rin's voice crackled over the comms, urgency lacing his words. "The structure's destabilizing." Kale grabbed the orb and signaled the team to retreat. They sprinted through collapsing hallways, dodging falling debris, and fighting against the increasing gravitational pull. Just as they reached the shuttle, one of the fleet's larger ships, the Eclipse Vanguard, was caught in the black hole's grip, its engines failing as it spiraled inward. "No," Kale screamed, watching helplessly as hundreds of lives vanished into the void. Grief weighed heavily on her chest, but there was no time to mourn. The shuttle launched just in time, narrowly escaping the ruins' implosion. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, the crew sat in stunned silence. Though victorious, The cost had been devastating. Holding the 3 core components in her hands, Kale whispered softly, "It's done. Now let's finish this." But even as hope flickered anew, she couldn't shake the feeling that their hardest fight still lay ahead. With the 3 core components secured, the Deathworlder fleet prepared for their final assault on the Vorith homeworld. The crew worked tirelessly to assemble the failsafe device aboard the Iron Resolve, its crystalline pieces glowing brighter as they fused together. Captain Calvera stood in the war room, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the coordinates of the Vorith hive mind's central nexus. This was it, the moment everything had been leading up to. Erindor hovered nearby, its translucent form shimmering faintly. "The failsafe is ready," it projected telepathically. "But activating it will require precise timing. Once engaged, you must hold position long enough for the collapse to take effect. If you retreat too soon, the Vorith may recover." Kale nodded grimly. "Understood. We'll stay until the job is done." Lieutenant Commander Maravos stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Captain, let me lead a strike team to secure the area around the Nexus. We can't risk interference when you activate the device." "No," Kale said firmly, turning to face her. "You've done enough. This time, I'm going with you." Mara opened her mouth to protest, but saw the determination in Cal's eyes. She simply nodded. "Understood, Captain." As the fleet approached the Vorith homeworld, the enemy swarm emerged en masse, their ships swarming like insects defending their nest. The battle erupted instantly. Lasers streaked through space. Explosions lit up the void, and the air inside every ship was thick with tension. Despite their losses, the Deathworlders fought with unmatched ferocity, knowing this was humanity's last stand. Kale led the strike team onto the surface of the planet, where the Vorith's central nexus loomed, a towering, pulsating structure that radiated malevolence. Its tendrils stretched across the landscape, connecting it to countless drones crawling over the terrain. As the team advanced, waves of enemies surged toward them, forcing them to fight tooth and nail for every inch of ground. "Keep moving," Kale shouted, firing her rifle at an incoming drone. Her heart pounded as she pushed forward, refusing to let fear take hold. Behind her, Erindor used its telepathic abilities to disable nearby drones, clearing a path for the team. Finally, they'd reached the base of the Nexus. Kale activated the failsafe, its crystals flaring with blinding energy. The ground trembled violently as the device began destabilizing the Vorith hive mind. Across the battlefield, the swarm faltered, their movements growing erratic as their connection to the central intelligence wavered. But the Vorith weren't about to go quietly. Reinforcements poured in, overwhelming the strike team. One by one, soldiers fell, buying precious seconds for Kale to complete the activation sequence. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her comrades sacrifice themselves without hesitation. "Captain, we need to leave," Mara yelled, dragging Kale away from the console just as the Nexus began collapsing inward. The ground cracked and split beneath their feet, threatening to swallow them whole. "I'm not leaving yet," Kale snapped, breaking free. "We finish this." As the failsafe reached critical mass, the Nexus imploded in a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The surviving crew scrambled back to their shuttles, narrowly escaping the destruction. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, Kale stared out at the burning remnants of the Vorith homeworld, her chest heaving with exhaustion and grief. "It's over," Erindor's voice echoed softly in her mind. "You have saved countless lives today." Kale didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the battered faces of her crew, knowing they had paid dearly for this victory. The fleet limped home, forever changed by what they had endured. Weeks later, as Earth celebrated the defeat of the Vorith, Kale stood alone on the bridge of the Iron Resolve. Erindor had departed, leaving behind cryptic words, "You are ready now." Though she didn't fully understand, Kale vowed to honor those who had fallen, not just by remembering their sacrifices, but by ensuring humanity would never again face such darkness unprepared. For now, the universe was safe, but Kale knew better than anyone. Peace was fragile, and vigilance was the price of survival.